Hi folks, today's episode is with Dan, who is the founder of Founders and Coders, which is an amazing coding bootcamp that is run in one of the most amazing co-working spaces on the face of the planet, which is Space 4 in Finsbury Park. And I've been wanting to do this podcast for ages because the whole project is very unique. It's deeply connected to the local community. Space 4 was one of the first affordable workspaces in the London Borough of Islington, who are slogging their guts out to make that whole system work. And there is so much connection and meaning in this episode. And one of the things we definitely talk about near the end is the Gaza Sky Geeks, which is a coding boot camp that Dan and his friends set up in the West Bank and in Palestine and in Gaza, and a little bit about what happened to that. So this is one of the most important episodes we've ever done on this podcast, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello folks, and welcome to the world famous Co-working Values podcast. And in the studio today is Dan. Dan, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
Yeah, hi. I'm known for having set up, and I'm still running Founders and Coders, the training organisation for software developers. But what would I like to be known for? Well, I'd like to be more known for what I'm doing now, to be honest. That's what I've thrown most of my energy in the last 12 years of my life into. So I wouldn't want to be known for anything else. That would just be a distraction.
After this podcast, Dan, you're going to need security when you walk down Fonthill Road. So we're here because I found you in Space 4 years ago, and I've always been a big fan of Founders and Coders. And can you just, for the people that don't know, in order to fulfill what you'd like to be known for people that don't know what Founders and Coders is, what is it all about?
So Founders and Coders trains software developers. That's our main thing, and we do that through a version of peer-led learning. And so I think that is our main thing.
And why did you, like you said, you started it 12 years ago? Like, why did you end up starting Founders and Coders? Was it because there was nowhere else would have you, or because you wanted to fill a unique gap in the marketplace? What kicked it off?
So my background is in software development and web publishing. I've been doing that for years, and my last gig was working on the London Olympic websites, which obviously that ended in 2012, and I was looking for my next thing to do. And at the time, the Coursera platform had just launched online, which puts, you may know about it, it puts university courses online. At the time, it was all free. I think these days you pay for most of the content, but this was in the early days, and content was just being put up there. And I did the very first Coursera course that launched. It was Andrew Ng's course on machine learning, and although I enjoyed it, I didn't really enjoy studying alone. So I organised meetup groups at the British Library in London for people doing online courses, mostly on Coursera. And that went from being just a evening activity to taking over my life, and then led to me running the first free coding bootcamp on Camden High Street, which I did early in 2014. And Founders and Coders just emerged out of that.
Where were you on Camden High Street? Right.
So we were given a home by an organisation called Camden Collective, which still operates. And they gave us a home for the year, and that really gave us the jump start that we needed.
And then how did you find Space 4, which is where I met you?
Oh yeah, well, after Camden High Street, we then moved on to the Roman Road, we needed to find a new space. We stayed there for 3 years, although it was always something that, felt temporary. It wasn't our permanent home. And when Outlandish, who run Space 4, and Outlandish is a co-op, they're a digital agency, they approached us. They had just opened the first version of Space 4 down the road from where I'm now speaking. And they invited us to come and join them in that space. And we jumped at that opportunity. That, I think, was in 2017. And we've been here ever since.
And what is it like? Why is this so interesting for you? Because I like the few times I met you, I just think you're like on this mission to get people coding, and it seems like I love. I can see how it's fun, but it's a lot of work. What is it? I want to say something a bit more interesting than, gee, what drives you, Dan? Because that sounds like a horrible podcast question. But what gives you the energy around this?
Actually, I think peer-led learning is the real thing. So, I mean, different things converged. Right, my own experience and knowledge was in that field, and then through doing these meetups at the British Library back in 2013, I guess, I realised what had been missing from my education in the past was this element of really close collaboration with other people with the same motivations, learning the same thing. And I realised that had been a big gap in my life. And it explained quite a lot of why I had never really enjoyed school or university. I think I'd misunderstood how we learn, or at least how I learn. And so I got really excited about the idea of, learning without there being an expert in the room, learning just with the help of others, exploring stuff together. So that the peer-led element was a big motivation. My previous experience obviously led me in that direction. And then the third element was, this was just at the beginning of the coding bootcamp movement. And there was this idea that because there was so much demand for software developers everywhere, that people who didn't have computer science or software engineering backgrounds could relatively quickly skill themselves up to be useful enough that people would employ them as software developers to, build the web. And that was a really compelling vision, because it meant not just that you could learn together, but you could learn together with a purpose. And that purpose was launching a new career for yourself, and potentially a very creative and a sustainable career as well. That's a really kind of compelling combination, and that's why we ended up focusing so much on software and going down the route of doing coding bootcamps.
How's that? Because something we definitely need to talk about is like, how has that coding career changed nowadays? Like the thing I see you posting most about on LinkedIn is something to do with AI and job markets, and then there was the whole COVID fallout. And what is, like we were saying before you came on, if I'm a junior developer, what are my chances now versus in 2019?
Yeah, well, we're in a period of transition and change. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I've been writing software for a very, very long time, and with a good deal of confidence, I can say I have never seen anything like the transformation in the process of producing software that we're going through now. And all that means is that if you want to be a software developer in the future, you're going to need some of the skills that you've always needed, but some of them are going to be very different as well. And a lot of us are unprepared for that. It's going to be challenging and painful, but also potentially rewarding over the next couple of years. And I hope beyond. I mean, I hope we don't have the AI jobs apocalypse and knowledge work comes to an end. There is that possible outcome. I'm not excluding it as a possibility, But that looks slightly less likely than what I think is going to happen. Is not so much that jobs are going to disappear, but they are going to change, and eventually they're going to change out of all recognition. Although I don't know how quickly that's going to happen, but it's going to happen really quickly in software development. That's very clear to me now, and anyone that thinks otherwise just hasn't been paying attention.
What was COVID like for you? Because there was this like huge tech boom, and I just like Scott Galloway, someone I follow a lot, and he talked about how tech has grown and gone crazy, and then it seemed was it last year, like there were loads of tech layoffs, and in what way does that impact you?
Yeah, well, okay. Our success, our fate as an organisation is very wrapped up with the need, the demand for entry level software developers and the desire of people to get into that industry. So we're kind of in the middle of that. So yeah, it affects us loads. And going back to the pandemic, it was really interesting. Like 2019 was the best year we'd ever had as an organisation. 2020 was really odd because we had our business models changed. We now draw down money from the apprenticeship levy, so we're dependent on the state for most of our funding. But in those days, we weren't. We were acting as an employment agency. The job market was so hot that we could actually generate just about enough income to support ourselves by charging fees to employers, which for entry level people is unimaginable now. But 2020 was really odd because all of those fees disappeared. So employers just weren't interested in paying us. Originally in the early weeks of the pandemic, hiring just stopped because nobody knew what was going to happen. But then very quickly it became clear that online was going to be how people were going to communicate, and business returned, but it was all via Zoom. And there was a huge upsurge in the need for software developer talent. And so although we weren't able to get fees from employers, almost all of our graduates, in fact, that year 2020 was very unusual. Every single one of our graduates, 47 in total, who finished our program got jobs as software developers within a few months of leaving us. So we had a really difficult year financially, but hugely successful. Things then picked up. We transitioned over to doing apprenticeships. We had a really successful year in 2022 with apprenticeships. We thought this was going to be like falling off a log or something. But what actually happened, as you will probably know, is there was a lot of overhiring in tech because, people assumed that the demand for new software would keep going. But of course, when people went back to the office as they started to do in 2022 and 2023, it turned out that the big bump that the digital sector had got during the pandemic receded. And all of the big tech companies realized they'd overhired, and then they started sacking people, which none of us were used to. It was not in our experience. And that created a really, really difficult market for entry-level talent, particularly people who didn't have computer science degrees or maths backgrounds, and the sorts of things that software companies tend to look for. And it meant that this window into a new world, it didn't close completely, but it became much narrower for people who were coming from different walks of life and different backgrounds. So yeah, it's been really challenging the last few years, and it's been very up and down, very interesting. And now we've got AI thrown into the mix as well, which really is making it super interesting. Not all in a bad way, I should say, but definitely challenging.
Yes, I just every day there's another AI something, and I know, like, it's always helped me, but I do sometimes wonder, like, even with podcasts, I could like get your voice, get my voice going. Probably could even do this today in AI Studio and just mash together a podcast, which is nearly the same as this, but we've just got it from YouTube transcripts or something. How does something I meant to ask earlier is how do you folks? I know you get a lot of support from, not a lot of support, but you get support from Islington Council. And how do you interact with the actual local community? Because that's something people always kind of wonder what they could do with their local community, but never quite get around to it. In particular, that employment thing, I meant to say.
Well, I suppose that, the most basic level, we're a really good training program, and we're on the ground here in Finsbury Park, and anyone can walk in off the street and come to any of our open sessions. And if they get the bug, we've got a series of programs that we can do, and they're all free. Nothing costs anything. So that's our main contribution to the community, is provide really good training at no cost, which ultimately, hopefully, will lead to high value jobs. But we also, we're part of Space 4, which is a co-working space. It's run by Outlandish, a digital cooperative agency, and Space 4 is funded by Islington Council and the Greater London Authority, and there's a wonderful mix of organisations here, and we feel right at home. We've actually collaborated with several of them. Some of them have hired our apprentices, so that's been amazing. We've done projects for them as well, so that's been good too. We do a fair amount of outreach. Schools, sixth form colleges will often get in touch, and we're really happy to go to jobs fairs to talk to local school leavers who might be looking at interesting careers and maybe having second thoughts about taking on student debt. So we do offer a different kind of route into high value jobs for people who are interested. So we work closely with Islington Council. We always try to be really responsive to them, and we're quite often nudging them about the courses that we're doing to let local people know about them. So open sessions, co-working opportunities, one-day workshops, evening sessions. We do all kinds of stuff that, people come from all around to come and do them, but we are particularly keen for people that are close to us to come and see what we're up to.
And with Space 4, because for other co-working spaces listening, and I'm thinking of you and Urban MBA, and there's Faceworks in Lewisham. Like you have that. Like Space 4 is a you use the word home there, and how can co-working spaces work with a project like yours over a long period of time, and have it be a home rather than just host something? Because I've seen a lot of people go, oh, you can come and host an event here, and it never really gets to the level projects like yours have, because they're kind of having them in, and then there's not. I think as I'm speaking, it seems there's like not as often a long-term commitment. So if there's a long-term commitment, it grows more. Like what as you working in Space 4, what worked?
Yeah, well, a lot of what works came about through serendipity. So it's an interesting task to pull that apart and say, well, how could this be replicated in a more intentional way? And I would say this, but like there aren't that many organisations like us. We're a non-profit and have a lot of experience in delivering training that is of interest to the rest of the world. So but having said all of that, I do think the combination of a training organisation and a co-working space is quite a powerful one. I think in our case, it's strengthened both sides, and it also makes us more supportable. Not some co-working spaces are purely commercial, and that's great. Others they emerge as as some sort of community need, or to support certain groups, or just support community need. And I do think when you have that combination of a place where people can come and work, and then also a place where they can learn stuff, that actually makes a co-working space much more supportable and of much more interest, I think, to the local authority. So I would say the way you go about doing that sort of thing is you do it as a collaboration. You find somebody or a sort of program. Also, employers come into this, because employers hire people. So, if there is a need within an area, I would argue that creating a community space which is available for people to work in, but also provides meaningful training opportunities, is quite powerful. Those sorts of things require a lot of effort from different people, but in our case, it's definitely been worth it, and it's definitely. And we by the way, we have spoken to other co-working spaces in other parts of the country about the possibility of doing something together, and there are things that you can do. We haven't yet been able to get over the line. I mean, ironically, we've set up programs 3,000 miles away, but we haven't yet set up any programs outside London in the UK. So I'm very open to suggestions.
Gee, Dan, where did you set up that program 3,000 miles away? That was my next question.
Yeah, so this all started back in 2016, I think. So it's almost 10 years ago. We ended up setting up programs in Nazareth, which is in Israel, in Gaza City, right in the heart of Gaza, and then also in the West Bank as well, in Hebron. This was a while ago, and none of the programs we set up are still running for all sorts of reasons. In the case of the Gaza campus, I think your listeners can probably guess why that's no longer running. But there was a period before the pandemic when we were really active in that part of the world.
Because I noticed on something I definitely want to ask you about is Gaza Sky Geeks, and I see them on Instagram, and how do they keep going?
Well, the short answer is they're not really. I mean, the office and the campus that they ran out of has been flattened, and so as a physical space, it's gone. Their students and their staff have all dispersed, or worse, and the organisation still exists, and I think they, and they're supported by Mercy Corps, a big NGO based in the US, probably not being funded much by the current administration, but it also got support from a lot of different places, from Google.org and from various European governments, Canadian government as well, I think. So it's an organisation that obviously has had to close down in Gaza because, you can't meaningfully run coding schools or startups or run incubators in a place that's under siege. So Gaza Sky Geeks exists as an idea and as an organisation, but they're obviously they're not able to be active in Gaza itself at the moment.
And how did that whole connection come about?
We were originally contacted almost 10 years ago by an historian and author called Tony David with an idea to run a coding boot camp in the West Bank. And he brought his partner, Rebecca, on board, and they persuaded me to come and visit Israel and East Jerusalem in 2016. And when I was out there, we got support from the British Embassy in Tel Aviv to run a program in Nazareth. I mean, we originally wanted to run one in the West Bank, but we couldn't get any interest for that. So we set up the Nazareth program the following year. And it was while we were still organising that we met Ryan, who at that time was the head of Gaza Sky Geeks. And we started the Gaza program in January 2017. It was led by a graduate of our London program called Bezart. So he just went out there as a volunteer. And that's how it got going. It was kind of challenging, right from the start. We were working both in Nazareth in Israel and in Gaza City, and we were advised by our partners not to go into Gaza. That was our partners who were in Nazareth. And I can remember we'd fly into Tel Aviv on the same plane, and then we'd separate at the airport, with one of us going to Nazareth and the other going to Gaza. And then by the following year, by 2018, we were running programs in Nazareth. We then had the program running in the West Bank in Hebron, which, if anything, was a kind of worse environment to live in, I would think, than even Gaza. It's people may not know about it, and this is maybe not the podcast for it, but it was really, really challenging place to operate. So we were there as well, and it was a really good test of our peer-led process, because at every stage, or at least from shortly after we started, it was led by people who had themselves been through our program. So Bezart, I've already mentioned, who started the Gaza program. He was one of the first students on our program. Owen, he was a graduate of our London program who started the Nazareth program, and he got kicked out by the Israeli authorities, but then ended up joining the staff team in Gaza. And then there was Matt Davis, who came out from the UK to do the first program in Nazareth. And then he came back to support our programs in London. Then he joined the Gaza Sky Geek staff team to run their programs in Gaza and also in the West Bank. And he ended up staying there for 5 years. He only returned just a few weeks before October the 7th. So, yeah, that whole thing. And that actually, it wasn't just the schools. In 2018, I think it was, there was a collaboration between graduates of both the London and Gaza programs, and it was supported by someone called Annie at an organisation called Interstitia. That collaboration, originally funded by us, turned into an agency called Yalla, and they're still running. They're a digital co-op that is a collaboration between graduates of our London and Gaza programs, and that's still running. I mean, they're Gazan developers, of whom there were 6 when the current genocide started. They're not really able to contribute much to the program for obvious reasons at the moment, but that agency is still going, and ready and willing to provide work for them again if they're able to, and if the current disaster, it's not really a disaster, is it? It's a siege by the Israelis, if that ever comes to an end. That there's still something there, a bit like GSG, it will be ready to pick them up again. But yeah, but that collaboration was most intense in the period up to the pandemic. So we actually, in the year before the pandemic, we handed over the Nazareth program to a local non-profit. And they employed Shireen, who's a Palestinian from Israel, who studied with us in London and then went back out to help run the program in Nazareth. And she then was hired by this non-profit. So, yeah, but my last visit to Gaza was in the summer of 2019, when the US Embassy, I think, had just moved to Jerusalem. And the March of Return in Gaza was ongoing, when the Israeli Defense Forces were just taking pot shots at civilians who were protesting at their continuing incarceration in Gaza. And the mood, to me, at that time, it already felt like it was darkening. It wasn't great. And, October the 7th didn't come out of nothing. So, yeah. And then the pandemic started. I mean, we stay in touch with GSG, the Yalla team. they had an office at Gaza Sky Geeks, and the London staff managed to visit, but obviously the school that we started with Gaza Sky Geeks it's been flattened. So I don't know. I don't know what comes next.
We'll come to that. So going back to the beginning of that, why was it interesting for you to take up David's offer of like, let's, it's much easier to go and do that on Jersey or Gibraltar. Like, what was the attraction of that region of the world for you?
The very simple answer is no one else asked us. Like, Tony was quite unusual in saying, "Oh, I like what you're doing." He only saw us on the website. He looked at the website and thought, "Oh, yeah, that looks interesting. That might work in a part of the world that I'm currently working in." So that's really why. I also, so there were different things. I have, Israel and Palestine is also in my history. And also, it was of interest to some of our alumni community. I remember when this first came in, we just posted it on our internal discussion forum saying someone's just got in touch about setting up a program, possibly on the West Bank, working with Palestinian refugees. And, we had a number of people who were willing to volunteer to do that. And so it was really, it came partly from my interest, but partly because we had people in our community who were looking for ways to give back to us because of what we had given them. And they saw this as a really good opportunity. But if it had come from another part of the world or come from somewhere in the UK, I think we would have been up for it, because we always saw what we were doing, and we still see it now as a set of ideas, a way of doing things that's very much rooted in community and in operating in a kind of peer-led way. And that's it. It just happened. Serendipity, to use that word again.
That all the best things are like, I've got a million. You can't engineer that serendipity, Dan. Like earlier on, you said this is because before I got into co-working, I ran a networking group. So we would all come and sit around the table and go like, I'm Alan the accountant, I'm Bernie the bookkeeper, I'm, let me try and keep that going, Carl the computer engineer. And then when we did that, people would stay around in the cafe afterwards and they'd pop open their laptops, and that was the bit I liked. And then I found co-working, and so there's actually a mate of mine, Fernando, who opened one of it's either the first or one of the first co-working spaces in Lisbon, and he did a whole dissertation for his PhD about how people learn off each other in co-working spaces, and just being in that informal education environment and helping each other out along the way is like really rewarding. I've learned, what's the next? So I've learned more about WordPress off people sitting next to me randomly than I have doing WordPress courses and stuff like that. And I actually think I learn way better by having a chat about things and sitting through hours of online video. So that collaborative environment is really important. Is there anything I haven't asked you, Dan, that you are dying to tell me before we jet off?
Yeah, I feel I probably already outstayed my welcome. We've covered a lot of the ground. I would just say that our big challenge right now. We mentioned this earlier briefly, but our big challenge right now is the way that our industry is changing, and we're really enjoying that. So if anyone's curious about how co-working spaces and training spaces might fit together and what AI might mean for the future of work, and is interested in talking about it, I'm very happy to listen, or indeed share some thoughts.
We'll put a link to your LinkedIn and I know you don't. I know that's not the first thing you open when you wake up in the morning, but also if you go to Space 4, there's the Wednesday. Can you say about the Wednesday community lunch? That's a great way to get the drink from the full Founders and Coders Space 4 fire hose.
Yeah, it's a really easy one. So most Wednesdays we try and take the time to eat together, and not everyone, but a good chunk of us will be here on Wednesdays. You know, someone will go out and get lunch, and we'll all throw a few quid into the pot and just break bread together. And if anyone finds themselves in North London and fancies coming over to lunch in Finsbury Park, we're right next to the tube station, and anyone's welcome. They just need to let us know we're coming so we can make sure we got enough food for you.
We'll put a link in the show notes to that. Dan, I really appreciate your time and energy today, and I've got to we need to find a way to play golf together more often or something, because always admired the energy around Founders and Coders, and it's been great to have you here today. Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to the show notes, there's all Founders and Coders, Gaza Sky Geeks. I'm going to link to David, the writer's website, because it's really, really interesting. There's the LinkedIn group, which is 8,000 people who we really need more people talking about co-working in there. And then we'll be in London in February 2026 for the Workspace Design Show at the legendary Business Design Centre. And wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle.